Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to BASE's Learning Lounge this month. We're excited to have you all here. I'm Kim Thomason. I am the Circle Lead for the Professional Development Circle of BASE. And we are glad and excited to have with us Dr. Lange and Ms. Perry for a discussion on what do you notice? Science through observation and documentation with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Careful observation, slowing down, noticing details, and using all of our senses is the foundation of science. Children ages 0 to 5 are already doing this naturally all the time. So in today's discussion, we will highlight activities, strategies, and tips for capturing young children's learning and for supporting children as they strengthen their own observation and documentation skills. Through examples from classrooms and educators, we will discuss how everyday moments can become powerful science opportunities. Our hope is that you will leave this webinar inspired to notice science everywhere and equipped to help every young child learn to do the same. I'll now pass it over to Dr. Lange and Ms. Perry to introduce themselves and lead us in discussion. Thank you and welcome.
Wonderful. Let me make sure this is working. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
My screen. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. This is just one of the best parts of our work, getting to interact with educators. So we're very excited to talk to you a bit about early science observation and documentation with children 0 to 5. First, I would like to acknowledge all the educators and partners, funders over the years who have been just an integral part of helping us build what we do at EC STEM Lab. And also to BASE for the invitation. This is really exciting to get to connect with you all today. So just a brief introduction. I am the director of the Early Childhood STEM Lab, the Center of Excellence in STEM Education, and the Northeast Tennessee STEM Innovation Hub, based at East Tennessee State University. And I've done a few other things. I just want to point out my own babies who helped me by being subjects the testing ground for a lot of some of the ideas that educators and others have helped us think through over the years. And that's them getting bigger and now even more fun down at the bottom there. Amy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amie Perry. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I work with Alissa at East Tennessee State University. We've worked together for about the last 5 years, and working with her has really helped me explore my own STEM identities. In what feels like another lifetime, I was an infant and toddler classroom teacher at our university's lab school. So I was able to do that. And currently, right now, I'm a Ph.D. student in the Department of Early Childhood Education here at ETSU. And I also still get to be not in the classroom because I work at a forest school. So it's a little bit of a unique take on the word classroom. But I lead a program for infants, toddlers, and their families at Seed Keepers Forest School. It's a pretty unique program because the families come into the forest with their children and stay there. So I get to work with the families and the children at the same time, really embedding STEM learning into what we're doing. So you'll hear me talk about that program throughout the day quite a bit. And my baby is in that picture on the bottom corner where we're with butterflies. And it's actually her birthday today. So it feels like a really special day to be doing this webinar. She's 5 now.
5. We want to share just a couple of things before we get started. We will be coming to the conference in March. And so I hope that if you have time or if you're planning to come, you'll join in at our session that we're doing along with Autumn Schaefer, who's, I believe, here in this room as well. Thanks for coming, Autumn. And we'll explore a little bit even beyond science, thinking about STEM and how STEM supports social emotional learning, and it'll be like an interactive station structure for that. So we hope that if you enjoy today, even if you don't, that you might come see us in person. And we have a whole lot of other offerings as well. Amy, I'll put our link in the chat there to EC STEM Lab, but we do lots of other free offerings across the year for early childhood educators in STEM. So I'll move on and just talk a little bit about our plan with you for this time together. A little bit of an introduction to get you thinking. We'll then talk about sort of the foundations of science and observation, and then science journals. We want to hear from you around science journals and documentation. We'll then have some classroom examples to wrap up the time with you at the end, so you can see what some of those have looked like in action in partnership with educators. So we hope that with the objectives for our time with you today, we hope that you'll be able to identify ways that careful observation, as we noted earlier, supports science learning for children ages 0 to 5, really, really young children even. Recognize everyday classroom moments as meaningful science opportunities, and really thinking about children's noticing and their wondering as well as ours. And finally, describe how to use practical strategies to capture and document young children's science thinking during everyday moments, routines, other times of the day, inside, outside. We hope you'll learn at least something new to try, have some fun, and hopefully be able to connect with one another. We're happy to take questions in the chat during the session, so feel free to pop those in, or if you're brave, unmute. We'd be happy to sort of answer your questions, and feel free to share as well during prompts, either of those two ways.
Hey, Alissa, before you keep going, can I ask two really quick? I'm curious how many folks here work with infants and toddlers and how many work with preschoolers. So if you're able to type in the chat and tell us if you work with infants and toddlers or if you work with preschoolers, you might have seen those fun reactions people have been sending. So I'm going to give you a second. All of the above. I love that. Both. Great. So already we have a mix. Okay. We don't even need the reaction. We've got a great mix here. So perfect. That's what I wanted to know.
Wonderful. Amazing. Yeah, quite a mix. That's great. We'll talk about sort of all the different age groups along the way. And the big ideas that guide our work at EC STEM Lab, you'll see, I hope, throughout this time that we have with you, you'll see these represented as well. We really want, and we love the idea of early STEM and integrated STEM being expansive, like all of us expanding how we think about science and STEM, not just for some kids, right? And not just limited to a science area, but really every day, all the time, babies, infants, toddlers, preschoolers are making observations and engaging in science investigations. And these are available and should be available to everyone. Also, we love to point out and find ways for you, for educators you work with or yourselves, to see all the amazing things you're already doing in science. You're already doing some great observations. Maybe not everyone has the name or the tools or the terms for what you're doing, but a lot of great science is happening already. And no matter where you're at, we can always grow and learn, right, and expand what we do, me included. And then STEM learning experiences, including science, grounded in children's interests and yours, promote these broader skills and development in other areas as well. Oh, before we do that, where'd our slide go? Our slide's gone. Oh, I went too fast. That must be what happened. So what we want you to do first is to just find a natural object around you. So I know you might all be in different places, and that's okay. But if you're somewhere where you can find something to draw with and something to draw on, and you have a natural object nearby you, that's great. If you don't have those, that's okay too. I'm just going to pull this plant that I almost killed over the holiday, but I didn't yet. It's still surviving. I'm going to put that one out here. And just while we're talking, Amy's got a couple examples there. She's got a pine cone and a stuffy.
It's a stuffed possum, but it's made of natural materials, so you can stretch your definition if you need to.
I like it. And so we're asking you with this object sort of first just to really slow down and look at it. You can use your other senses if that makes sense to just sort of notice what that object is in front of you, what it looks like, what colors you see maybe. Maybe you notice some textures. If I look at this plant, I notice that some of the leaves are quite shiny, so they're really reflecting the light. And I see different shades of green in these leaves. They're also kind of an interesting shape leaf, if I just sort of notice my object. And I don't know about you, sometimes I need to take a deep breath to slow myself down, just to engage in this careful observation of an object in front of me. Something, again, speaking for myself, I don't always take the time to do. So I'm encouraging you just to take that time to take a breath and notice something that's right in front of you. And then again, if you have the materials available, just to sort of try to document what you notice, what you observe. And we're going to try to document it as you see it. So representing the natural object or stuffed possum, stuffy, as you see it, as opposed to sort of a creative representation, right? I'm going to draw the shape of this leaf because it's just such a unique shaped leaf. So as you're doing that, you have your object, you're noticing, and you're trying to represent your object in some way. You can continue to work on that as we move forward to the next slide. Okay. So as you're drawing, for me, I noticed it took me some time to slow myself down enough to pay attention to the object. And I was interested in that I noticed the texture, the way it reflected, but also the different textures of the leaves. So those are some things I noticed about my object. And then as you're documenting and you feel comfortable, you can share your answers to these questions. So what did you notice about that experience? What did you notice about what you drew? So what do you notice about the experience of documenting what you observed?
I noticed when I was looking at my pine cone that it's like crumbly and like the pieces of it are squishy, which makes me think that maybe it's rotting or decomposing. And that also makes it really tricky to draw because the pieces of the pine cone are kind of squished. So when you try to draw it, all the
Um,
pieces just look kind of squished too. It's a little
yeah.
harder to draw than like a freshly plucked pine cone off of a tree, perhaps.
That's a cool observation. Mm. Here's my drawing of the leaf. I noticed that, oh, maybe I have to not blur my picture for a second. I noticed that um, I sometimes like to spend a lot of time feeling good about my art and my science drawing, and sometimes I feel like it's not as strong, and then I'm working on being okay with that. So this was just a leaf, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay to be a pretty straightforward lead, but I do notice that I do sometimes feel a little discomfort about documenting my drawing skills, for example. Oh, I see a reflection in the chat. Each rock is unique. Science in describing a natural object, technology, choosing what tool to use to document. Oh, cool. So you're noticing you have an observation about the object you chose and also seeing how science, technology, and math all kind of come into play in this one experience. So you do see some science observation, some technology, the other letters in STEM as well. Any other observations to share about what this was like? Oh, I see. I missed Autumn's. A driftword sign with rock smelling. Aww. Different ridge in the wood and textures in the rock. Cool. And the drawing of it worked my focus skills. You try to get all the tiny differences. Yeah, it takes some concentration as well. Nice. So feel free to share other observations, other bits of this experience that you noticed, what you noticed about paying careful attention and then trying to document that object. And then the last question was about literacy. So was there literacy in this experience? Yes, you use some great vocabulary, right, to describe what you drew or what you noticed. These descriptive words are really powerful in literacy and language as well as in science and STEM too. Wonderful. And I'm sure if many of you have been working with young children that you can also ask children to describe their experience and then write down what they drew as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well in a little bit here. Wonderful. So yeah, well, the slides are kind of being fun. I'm going to call it fun. Can you see that okay? What is science? Okay. So yeah, I hope that through a very sort of straightforward experience, you could see all the opportunities, right? Sometimes we feel like we need a special kit to do science with young children, but we just picked something around us, paid careful attention, and then tried to capture it somehow, right? Science is a study of the natural and built world, seen and unseen, and really, observation is at the core of science, right? And young children obviously have access to using their senses, generally speaking, to make sense of the world around them, to notice the world around them. And there's much more to kind of science education broadly, but we only have a short time, so we'll capture it in this way that there's content to learn, like the stuff of science. What is there to learn about these phenomena around us? And there's these practices. So what do we want kids to do that are just like what scientists do, right? We can think of those as the science practices. And then there's more things like habits of mind, right? And attention to precision and habits of mind approaches to learning as well. But we're going to talk mainly about observation, and we will also just briefly touch on some of the content of science. So you can think about science content. This is one way to think about them in these sort of broad categories of physical science, life science, earth and space science, and then engineering technology can kind of go across all of those as well. So when we think about physical science, what's that child doing on the left? There's the physical science in there, do you think? Can you see it? Pop it in the chat if you can see the physical science happening. So physics of motion, forces in motion, right? So this is one of Amy's forest photos, is a child sort of rolling balls down a really long ramp or a really long tube and sort of noticing what happens as it moves through and what it does, how the object moves at the other end as it comes out the other end, right? So there's an open exploration of forces, motion, right? Gravity is pulling that object down. It's got some inertia. And even if these toddlers aren't saying the word inertia, they're engaging in practices with the physical science content. And then next you can see some life science. Oh my gosh, is that one of your forest babies, Amie? That this baby found a living creature in the forest and is noticing and observing and paying attention to that. We can think about life science in terms of living and non-living, life cycles, right? Sometimes habitats, where what do living things need to survive and thrive? So you may think about where you or the teachers you work with engage in life science explorations with young children. I think about heredity too. How do sort of offspring look or not look like their the parents as well? Then Earth and space science, we can think about what do you observe up in the sky for space science? I noticed that the moon is up there and it sort of changes shapes, right? Children might notice shadows on the ground as the sun appears to move across the sky. And then we can think about Earth materials. So you may be able to think of examples in your own practice or with the teachers you work with in which children are exploring those physical Earth materials. So weather is another example. And then engineering, one of our favorites, is this a process to create, design, create, test, iterate in order to solve a problem or meet a need. And it's one of these areas that just, whenever we do this work or see teachers do work with kids in engineering, it's just super, super engaging. So just those are just sort of the basics, a very quick overview of some science content. We want to just talk a little bit about observation. So we can think about this, like I said, the very important practice of observation, right? At that core, like this is what adult scientists are doing. They're noticing the world around them with tools or without tools to help. They pay careful attention to what they notice. They document these observations, right? Over time, and as they see the same thing or observe the same thing, then we start to feel like maybe these observations are telling us something pretty consistent about the world around us, right? And then when observations happen that don't align with those, then that might change how scientists think about this phenomenon or a law, for example. And as this may not be news to you, but that's actually not a problem, right? That's actually part of science. We make observations and it maybe changes the way we think about something, which is a cool thing. And really young kids are already doing this. They are making observations and trying to put those pieces together, right? About what they see in the world around them and what that means. Like, Amie, is there a story about this puddle? You have so many good puddle stories.
Not a story necessarily, just, again, in offering that you don't have to have a fancy kit to do these things with children, right? There's all kinds of science just happening in this puddle right here. And they're not just observing the changes of the puddle with their eyes, right? It's a full body experience for them. So they're gathering information when they're jumping in the puddle, when they're touching the muddy water. They're gathering all that information, which helps them to learn about the world around them. And just in this picture, there's children who are 1, 2, and 3, all of them right there, all having a shared experience together, observing and acting on those observations too, right? If I jump really hard, there's a big splash. If I jump kind of softer, splash is smaller. So we can do this anytime, anywhere. You go to the next slide. And observation is really an infant and toddler superpower. So a lot of times when I'm working with infant and toddler educators, uh, folks seem to think that infants and toddlers aren't capable of doing STEM, right? I remember whenever I wanted to do a STEM project with some infants and toddlers in my classroom, I had pitched it to a teacher as a project. And they kind of laughed and said, oh, I'll be impressed if you can get them engaged for more than 5 minutes. And I was like, 5 minutes is our baseline, you know? And I offered these STEM-focused experiences to my group of children, and they were engaged for, 30 to 45 minutes at a time. So it is not that infants and toddlers are not capable of engaging in practices like observation. They are incredible scientists. There's no other time in our lives where our brain is developing faster than when we are from 0 to 3. If I'm remembering correctly, I think our brains are developing at about 1 million neural connections per second at the time we're infants. As in comparison to right now, my adult brain is operating at about 1,000 per second. So it's a really, really big difference. So it's an important time for us as educators to offer experiences for infants and toddlers that build on these skills that will be super powerful for them in the future. Um, so there are some resources out there for educators to learn a little bit more about this. That article by Adams and Park-Lane about what is science with infants and toddlers has some great ideas. And there's also a infant and toddler STEM book you can check out now as well. But for us as adults, we can offer materials, give infants and toddlers time to explore, and be responsive and curious in our interactions with them, and wonder, what are they thinking? What are they trying to figure out? Like I look at this image of this child sitting up on a bench holding the block, she's set right next to a ramp. And that baby is 6 months old in that picture. And she's engaged in a ramps provocation right there. And she would pick up that block and put it down and send it down the ramp. And she did that repeatedly over and over. So that's a really young child showing some really sustained observation and engagement skills, right? So they are super capable, and we can show them that we see those capabilities by giving them the opportunity to use them. Okay, can you go to the next one? And one of the ways that we can help to do this is we can work with science journals to record observations and documentation, both us adults and kids, both of us. So if you can type in the chat, what are your experiences with science journals? Has anybody used them in their classroom before? They really love to draw outdoors. Yeah. Familiar with the concept, but have never used them. Okay, great. That's handy to know. Love them. Use them in a preschool classroom and have used them as a parent. Love it. We haven't used journals. We like to send them outside with a clipboard and paper. Yeah, that's a form of journaling, right? So I'm going to start talking about the journals. Feel free to keep putting your experiences in the chat, though. Ooh, how would we expand this to infants? Ooh, Helen, I'm going to tell you. I love that question. All right, so what are science journals in the first place? They are tools that help us collect learners' scientific observations over time, right? That's kind of the key word with the journal piece. We're doing something over time. And children might do this in lots of different ways. They might write, draw, or represent in other ways what they are learning. But they capture those scientific observations and document scientific phenomena. They might make predictions, look for patterns, make claims. This part is where it kind of depends on what age group of child you're working with, right? So infants and toddlers are mostly going to be documenting just what they're seeing, right? They're going to be kind of sketching out really roughly what they see. And it's going to be more abstract and more open to interpretation than older children, right? But still they are documenting what they are thinking on a piece of paper. And then older children, like your older preschoolers, when you're working with children who are more engaged in dialogue with you, they might be looking to make some predictions and try out writing some words or making letter shapes in their science journals. So there's really a lot of possibilities whenever you're using these as a tool for observation and documentation. And why should we use these in the first place, right? It's a really simple way that's flexible too, that allows you to honor children's thinking. It helps to make learning visible, thinking and learning visible. So not just for students, but for you and for families. Everyone is able to see exactly what they are thinking about. Scientists spend a lot of their time documenting their observations, right? So if you want to hone some science practices and giving children the opportunity to document what they think is a strong way to do that. It can help support memory, develop literacy skills. It's reinforcing that idea that careful observation in science is really important. And it also is a great way to assess learning, right? It's such a such a tool, a strong tool to be able to look at this journal that you maybe started at the beginning of the year and seeing the way children were drawing and writing at that time and compare, what's this look like in a month? What does this look like at the end of the year? And it's a great visual way to see just how much that child has advanced while they've been in your classroom. And there's many different formats to these, right? So somebody mentioned they like to send them outside with a clipboard and a piece of paper. So if you're sending children outside already with a clipboard and a piece of paper, if you start keeping those pieces of paper, then, oh, that's so fun. Yeah, that's fun. Okay, sorry, distracted by the chat, folks. So if you're sending them outside with a piece of paper and you're keeping them, in a folder, then all of a sudden you have this collection that kind of becomes their journal, right? You can do this in lots of different ways. You can opt for a booklet type of format that's maybe just a few pages or as many pages, right? It could depend on your learners and maybe what you think they're ready for at that time. You can make them yourself. You can purchase them. You can use different types of mediums like 3D materials. We've seen teachers use popsicle sticks in their journals with children before. You even can use tablets if you kind of lean electronic in the way that you are documenting. It could be for a group. So I'll show you some example group journaling that infants and toddlers have done with me. You also can do some individual journals as well. Not yet to the worm touching Peggy. Oh, that's so fun. So the there is no wrong or right way to be doing a journal with young children. As long as you're documenting over time, then you are science journaling. I
I
see you're
just want
unmuted.
to point out too, the 3D material idea might be if you've already done some science journals, it sounded like some of you have and some of you haven't. That might be a way to challenge your learners to sort of think even in a new way about how to document what you're observing, right? So you maybe have obviously you've used 3D materials before, but as a way to document what you notice, a colleague, Susan Yeager in Canada, has shared her articles with us about making maps with kids. So I think the same idea could be applied to journals in terms of how kids what they're observing and how they're representing what they're noticing. That would be kind of a neat thing to see what they create, let's say with, I don't know, Play-Doh maybe at the beginning of the year to represent the plant that they're growing. And then make a model later. Does their model change? So I would just encourage you to think creatively and flexibly about what does it mean to document scientific observations.
And also the way that your learners kind of lean can help you too, right? Like science journaling is really powerful for my daughter because she doesn't really like creative drawing. She's like if you offer for her to draw like a fantasy type of thing, I'm not really interested in that. But if you give her a concrete object, then she's much more interested in that. And like Alissa is mentioning, if you have learners who are really interested in Play-Doh or clay, you can lean that way with your journaling. Paint as well. I use some paint with my infants and toddlers in the way we document the seasons. So the possibilities are endless. Get creative with it, and if there's a certain way that you like to document too, you might consider that with your learners. This is a super fun idea for a homemade journal. Has anybody ever seen this before, where you take a like a manila envelope and add some loose leaf pieces of paper into it and then stick a rubber band in the middle? It creates a journal right there, and then where it's got that manila envelope kind of as the backing, children can actually put like the treasures that they find into that journal. So we really like that model. And then some helpful tools to have if you're considering science journals in your classroom are magnifying glasses to really help us get that up close look at what we're observing. Clipboards, right? So somebody mentioned they send children out with clipboards and paper. I love clipboards, are one of my favorite materials with infants and toddlers, are so handy. Tethering a writing tool to that clipboard. And also date stamps, especially preschool age children, really interested, right, in starting to learn more about time. So having a date stamp that kind of allows them to take notice of what that date is as well. Let's see, I see a question here. Could you have a basket/bag with younger infants to collect items? You can then collage with children back in the classroom in a group type journal. Oh yeah, I think that is a great idea. I've done similar things with my group too. Yep. Especially if you're like tracking the seasons. Um, that's a cool way to do it. A 3D collage. All right. Seems like you're sharing some great ideas in the chat. Lisa, can you go to the next one for me? And what should children document in these science journals? And again, the possibilities for this are endless, but some ideas that we have for you to kind of get started with are things like outdoor spaces. So going out on a nature walk, finding plants near your school. There's some great tips in a NACE blog for this as well. Classroom science investigations. So if you're documenting things like plant growth over time or predicting about the distance of a toy car's path going down a ramp, how far is that car going to go down the ramp? So children could also observe those things and document them in their science journals. If you have a class pet, what a perfect thing to have children journal about, right? Or even if you don't have a class pet, we'll show you a classroom example of somebody using the animal cameras. At ETSU, we have eagle cameras. So she had children watch those, and you could find an animal camera that's interesting to your learners to watch as well. Or even journals can go home. So send the journals home with families and have them do something like observe the moon phases is an idea. If you have any other ones, feel free to add those to the chat. I'm going to move through a few examples here of science journals kind of in action in classrooms. So this first one is the Eagle Cam example. So documenting observations of Eagle Cams over time. And you can see that this is kind of a group journal, right? So this was done as a class, and they used that whiteboard calendar to document what they saw whenever they checked the Eagle Cams each day. So you can see they noted the weather. They also have noted things like when an egg was laid. So you can see on February 10th, Eggs Day. The children wrote that. I can see egg written by a child, and also a teacher going back and writing Egg Day as well. Looks like she did that for most of those words on the calendar. And we have quite a bit more about that Eagle Cam project. Alyssa added that to the chat if you're interested. Here is some 3D journaling of how a child documented worms. So Alyssa did this super cool worm project with a teacher at the Child Study Center. where they were studying worms. And you can see where the worm was flopping around on the paper, and they documented on the paper where the worm was, what it was looking like. The popsicle stick shows you the segments of the worm, right? The child got really close to that worm and found the segments and documented those on the popsicle stick. And then you also can see that the teacher documented the words of the child as well for this journal. So for our children who, in that 0 to 5 range, our job as educators is to help kind of bridge in the journals and to do some of the documentation of their thinking alongside them. So this teacher wrote, this is the words of the child. Is he dead? He is moving. He is smelling the paper. His tail causes him to go fast. He is not dead. So the teacher captured how that child's thinking shifted all through that one interaction with the worm on the paper. So cool and powerful, right? And infants and toddlers are super capable of journaling as well. So in these 4 images, you'll see some journals of different formats. So this is a journal I've purchased that's already binded for me, which is pretty convenient. And she's writing out some observations she's making at the mud kitchen of her ingredients to make a pizza. She was writing down what she used. This child at the pond had picked up a leaf and was interested in tracing the leaf on the piece of paper to document it. So that's a clipboard and paper journal type where I'd take the paper and keep it for that child so we could look at her observations over time, right? This child here next to the drums, again, it's the clipboard with the paper. And what he was documenting were observations of sound. So that child would go and hit the drum in the drum circle and then go make marks on the piece of paper. So, and again, I can't exactly tell you about his thinking, right? Because we're not really at a point where we can conversate necessarily. But I have a really interesting piece of his thinking that makes me wonder too, like, what was it that he was noticing? And was he making the same amount of marks as he made on the drum? Makes me want to know more about that. And then I had mentioned some paint journals. So I consider these at the end of each season, I'll give the group of children a canvas. And we're painting our observations of the season is kind of the invitation for children. So at this time of year, it was summer moving into fall. So we were just starting to see the changes of the leaves here and the flowers kind of going away. So these children have a lot of green paint, a lot of red paint, and then a lot of yellow paint too. So it's a perfect representation in my eyes of that change of season, right? As we're starting to see the green leave and then the red and the orange come through as well. And it's abstract and it maybe doesn't necessarily look exactly like a perfect painting of the seasons, but it demonstrates their thinking and noticing of the world around them, which is really important. Go to the next one. We also mentioned science journals as assessment. So you all can kind of consider what skills or knowledge could you assess using science journals? Alissa, you're unmuted. Do you want to?
I was just going to say we got to wrap up. So this is probably an invitation to think more about all that the both of us have shared. And it sounds like some of you have already done or are already doing some of the journaling. So I guess an invitation is sort of where would you take it next? And some of your colleagues on the call have had some great ideas too. So check out the chat. What might you try to extend what you do with science journals? And I think do we have our takeaways, Amy? Oh, they're there. We hope that you sort of, in this time with us, sort of connected with the idea of the value of this careful observation. And as Amie talked to, thinking about journaling or journaling with really, really young kids and what does that look like? What's the value of that? I think that piece over time can be really interesting to explore as well. And there are just so many ways to do it. We'd encourage you to, like I said, think creatively and what do you have around you already? What do your kids love to interact with? Great place to start to expand your science journaling or documentation practice. And hopefully you've seen sort of just all the benefits for assessment, for yourself, for your learners as well, really in any space. I see a question here. Any suggestions for making the practice a habit? So when you say the practice, do you mean, tell us a little more about what you mean there. So doing journaling more regularly, incorporating it more into what you're doing regularly is what I hear you asking. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if we have one more minute, but okay. That's a good question. I think, for me and Amie might have another take as well. I'm always about realistic, shifts or trying new things that might actually last. So I'd say, what do you already have around you? What are you interested in? What are the kids interested in? And not just in terms of materials, but maybe what are you currently exploring in your classroom, and start there. Start with a book that you love or a material or a topic that you love. And just try something small. It doesn't have to be over time at first. Sort of try the slow down and observe piece, see how that goes. And then it can always be built upon later. Amie, would you add anything?
I would say similarly, starting small and uh, what Alissa mentioned, doing what is realistic and doing what you can. It can be a lot of work to gather these materials and we are pulled in lots of directions, right? Um, and I just would encourage you to give it a try, and you might find that actually that little bit of work and gathering and providing the materials actually gives your learners a really extended kind of sustained time for engagement that might surprise you.
That's nice. And I just left up our slide with our emails on it. Like I said, this is really our passion. So if there's anything that you have more questions about or you're looking for other resources, we'd be happy to sort of send you in the right direction as well. And I'll just put one more link in the chat, which is infants and toddlers page that Amie's spearheading for us. She and I wrote an article and she wrote another piece for NACE recently. So we're hoping more work will come out in that space because we've heard that a lot of infants and toddler teachers are really interested in exploring this more.
Well, thank you to Amie and Alissa for your time today. This is wonderful information, and I hope you guys, it sounds like we have some ideas churning and thoughts, so please stay connected with them. We will record and get this up on our VACE YouTube page for, sharing and or revisiting. Again, just thank you to our speakers and to all the educators that have joined us today. And we look forward to seeing you back here as well as in March at our annual conference. Thank you, everyone.